Time's flying. So for the class of 2026 of your college, so network and see who are those people. You may get to know other people that way. Find some people from your area to know, and then use the online world to connect. I mean, take the pluses from COVID, like, hey, let's have a Zoom day where we just like say hi. Like, it's nice if you see faces for the first time, right? So after you get to know them. So don't be afraid of doing that. Everyone's afraid in this process, even the ones who are don't have the courage to admit it. So, right, it's a new adventure, and the more you know about other people, check out the website Student Life. Like, now you know, like, this is your campus. What are some things to do? And for those programs, and then if you have heard about Older's large classes, you could still take, for those who don't need a break, and maybe take an asynchronous online class. Take a transferable course. You don't have to take that intro psych class on that campus. You don't have to take that, certain science course. Like, if you're not a STEM major, you could take meteorology, oceanography, geology. It doesn't have to be that traditional classes, and get it over with in the summer, and then get adjusted. So those are something that's important. Know that if you are getting any financial aid, or even if you're not, see if you want to work on campus, right? Even if it's just 10 hours a week, know where are the rec center, what are the hours. So I wouldn't do it all at once. I think the key thing is do those forms, have those deadlines first. Second is trying to network with other people who are going to be the class of 2026, or whatever class that you're enrolling in. And then third thing is just trying to see, like, okay, what's really key for me? Is it, what is some clubs that I want to be engaged in, right? I think a lot of times people try to focus on the movie idea of college. And that's always a bad illusion to have. It's a bad drug that's not healthy. Just go there, see what they have, and make it your own. Doesn't matter where you're going, whether it's Cal Poly San Luis Obispo, a UC, a community college, a private school far away or close to home. Make it your own. Keep the good close to you, and keep the bad far, far away from you.
That's really good information. I'm really glad that I know all of that, and now I have that in my mind, right in the front of my mind, just to consider and think about all day and night. Every time I have a moment of free thought, that is what I will be thinking about, because there's a lot that there still is to do. And it boggles my mind to think, when we started this podcast, it was so long ago, and I had no idea any of this was going to happen. And even though it feels like it's over because I have committed to a college, it still is not over. And there's still a lot to think about, and a lot of decisions to make about my future.
Oh, yeah. I mean, there's also probably still scholarships you could apply to. I mean, a lot of times students don't know that. Like, that's the thing is, like, whatever's important to you, make that office your best friend. So even if you don't get financial aid or not, just say, hey, is there any scholarships I could still apply to? If there's a department, I mean, if you don't know who Weird Al is, they're actually making a documentary from the actor from Harry Potter about he graduated from Cal Poly San Luis Obispo and worked in their broadcasting. And you have your resume, Isabel, already about being a podcaster. So, those are things that you don't have to wait until college begins. There are professors eager to find students to connect with you. And if they're not eager to connect with you back, then okay, let me check someone else out. And then don't forget, what's the favorite website that I tell everyone not to forget? Did you forget it?
That's a good question. Can I guess? Is it, I need to think. I feel like it has something to do with professor, and it's like, I can't even remember. It's good question, Anna.
So it is the one website. If anything, you've listened to all these podcasts, is ratemyprofessors.com. So what you want to do is, for regardless of what school you're going to next year, go to that website, check out it is so reliable because remember what's different in your high school and other programs is that you'll get reviews of different schools. Now, if like I just put it into the computer right now and it says everything's 0, that means I typed something wrong. So just make sure that you put in your school in there. And it's kind of hard for schools because not like Cal Poly, it's California Polytechnic Institute, et cetera, et cetera. So that's something where you can search up a school. Like, for example, I'm just going to pick up randomly Cal Poly Pomona, and which is another CSU campus on there. And then you can go look up professors, specific classes. So you will know who your professor is, who is great, who is not, because there's always going to be certain teachers who are not great at what they do and some who are not. And so you really want that. Now, the website is terrible because there's all these ads. That means they won't stalk you like Instagram is, but it's such useful information. Trust me, it works. It's really important to do.
Okay, I'll make sure not to forget that website, ratemyprofessors.com.
That's right, with an S at the end. So ratemyprofessors.com. So now you said it's been a year. There was no predictability. But what would you have done different? What you would done the same? And what are you so grateful that you did?
When I think about it and think about things that I would have done different, I think that would have to go way back into my previous high school years. And maybe I would have tried a little harder. Maybe I would have tried to get that perfect GPA because that's what really would have made the difference. I think that the essays that I wrote and the personal statements and all of the information I filled out about my extracurricular activities, I did those to the best of my ability. I think I talked about myself. I think I really told my story, and I just talked about some things that are special and unique to me. And although I did not get accepted into any of the UC schools I applied for, I really do think that I did the best I could. And if they made their decision based off my GPA, then that's okay with me because I know that I did the best I could in my application. One thing I do think I could change was maybe my effort when it comes to scholarships. I feel like I could have gone on getting some scholarships done, getting some scholarship applications filled out a lot earlier than I started. I think that I had this one idea of this posse scholarship that I remember talking about way early on in this podcast. And that, it didn't work out for me, but it kind of got me down and it got me feeling like, you know what, maybe this whole scholarship thing is not going to work. And I wish I didn't let that discourage me. I wish I really did keep trying for scholarships because I do think it could have made a difference. And maybe I wouldn't have to consider cost as much when I was deciding a college because that was really one of the main deciding factors when it came between Colorado State University and Cal Poly San Luis Obispo was the cost. And it costed a whole lot more to go out of state, which I thought would have been an awesome experience than it did to stay in state. And I'm glad that I made the decision that I did, but I kind of wish that decision didn't have to do so much with cost. And maybe if I would have spent more time on scholarships, that would have made a difference.
No, and the only thing is you could do is learn from your past, right? You're not my first student, and unfortunately won't be my last student where, oh, are you kidding me? I felt I was so strong. And unfortunately, this is such a subjective and selfish process on both sides, right? And not saying that's a bad thing, right? I mean, you should be selfish about getting what you want, like for your new marriage, your new relationship with the college. And the college at the same time, right? Like they have their objectives of what they want to, and hopefully it works out for everyone. But with that knowledge comes, now you go to financial aid office. Even now, it's like, hey, are there any scholarships for freshmen or for this major or for this program? Like a lot of times students don't realize it. And now you're not applying for scholarships for all schools. You can just apply for the ones just for Cal Poly San Luis Obispo, right? So that's something that's really important and good. And at the same time, you did really best. Like just because, I think a lot of times people forget, like if there's semifinals or final, that's still accomplishment, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's so important. And yeah, money ggets in the way, right? There's always going to be that neighbor is like, oh, your family could buy you an Audi every year and pay the $80,000 per year for each school. And and it's hard, right? Because there's a lot of circumstances, right? Some
Yeah.
people may just had generational wealth, or that parent just happened to have that job, or etc. But when you think about it, after you get your first job, no one goes and says in a job interview, so I graduated from this. It's It's all about your experiences and accomplishments. That name of that school was just your experience, and it's all about what you do. And if you're ever wondering, like, oh, yeah, but go to the website called linkedin.com, put in the name of your school, check out the alumni. You can even narrow it down based on your major. And it is unbelievable the success rate, because there's a lot of people. I know one of our local likely schools, because Cal State's, if you're in their district area, it's geared up. So it to be likely for most students to be accepted there, especially like if you have a B, around a B average. And they're tearing down a building because an alumni donated, listen, everyone, $25 million, right? And wasn't a big name school nationwide, San Francisco State University, go Gators. But success is what you make of it. And that's a beauty. And did you know that the Cal State system educates the most employees in California than any other college in the nation? That's right. And California is a big state. So you're with a very proud network. And Cal Poly San Luis Obispo, you're like, where is San Luis Obispo? So literally I tell everyone, it's 4 hours away from San Francisco and LA. Employers fly in to recruit people for Cal Poly San Luis Obispo. I had a student who did get into a lot of different schools. It was a different time, so it wasn't as competitive for UCs. So for those of you who are like, what is up with the the public schools in California? It's all about money, and it's all about space. Imagine a pitcher of water, try and pour it through a straw. Well, in California public schools, think of those stirring straws and putting a pitcher of water through that. There's just no space in the dorms. There's no funding. I mean, I don't know. Did you know there was a lawsuit for UC Berkeley? The neighbors were like, you can't enroll that many freshmen. And the judge agreed with them in the Berkeley courts.
I did hear about that. And I think that's just insane. I couldn't even believe it.
The government overturned that. They're like, you crazy. Like, you knew Berkeley was around since 1800s when you bought this property. But
exactly.
it just shows, because, during the recession when Schwarzenegger, believe it or not, was governor, he had to take $1 billion out of higher education. That money never went back. And that's not his fault. That's all the legislators afterwards. And so this is why the California schools have been really challenging. But Cal Poly San Luis Obispo, in their formula, and keep in mind, you always say Isabel, try harder. Did you know that Cal Poly San Luis Obispo starts looking at GPA? It's the only Cal State since 9th grade year.
That is really interesting to me, because I did know that the California state schools looked mainly at GPA, but I did not know that Cal Poly was the only one that looked all of those years.
And they were looking at your academic preparation towards your major, and they did, I don't know if you remember, all your hours for your activities. So congrats on what you're doing, because it's a school that, like San Diego State, admits by major. Pretty much most of the Cal State schools are doing that. So that's something that's really great. Now, there is also another interesting fact. Cal Poly is one of the last schools that is only in the California State University system, and it will impact you greatly.
It's one of the last schools that is the only
quarter school. So you will know. So because your school is pretty fast, right? Like you're not a semester school, so you are used to switching classes over. So you will have an edge, because most high schools are semester schools. So you will have a big edge going to Cal Poly San Luis Obispo of that quick pace turnaround. All right, we have different classes because quarter schools are not as long. And then you don't start school till late September.
I do know that. I do. I know my moving date is September 13th, and I know I start around the 19th, I think. And that's so exciting. I'm
No, it
so
is.
excited for orientation. I'm excited for everything that they've been emailing me and telling me about all of this stuff that they have to offer. And it just makes